That was clutch. I'm saying a lot right there because I do feel like RedBud was pretty hot. Just keeps on growing, and here comes some champagne. The fans are going to love this.
This is it. Chance
Hymas doing a great job defending his position.
He's going to do it again in Moto2.
Chase Sexton swings RedBud. In his attempt to take control. 450 motocross. Let's go.
Yeah, welcome to SMX Insider. We are headed to Spring Creek, Millville, Minnesota, the 24th SMX race this year into the second half of Pro Motocross. But it is a whole new world. JT, for the first time in over a year, we saw what 450 racing would look like without Jett Lawrence in it. Credit to Lawrence for hanging out and signing autographs with the thumb injury, but he's not going to be racing for the next couple of weekends. And lo and behold, look who responds. Look who gets the 1-1, JT.
Well, think about a week ago, us recording this show and what the landscape of this series and class looked like. Fast forward a week ahead, and everything's changed. I think everything's changed in the mind of racers like Chase Sexton and Hunter Lawrence. And for the points, everything's up for grabs now, and we have a completely different championship than we did just 7 days ago.
Yeah, so Sexton wins, RedBud takes the points lead. Biggest margin of the year that anyone's had in a race win in the second moto there. It almost makes you wonder, this was the trajectory that Sexton was supposed to be on. We remember the close championship fight between he and Eli Tomac 2 years ago. I remember Eli, JT, saying to you on the podium, Chase is the next guy, hands down, for sure. At that point, it was too hard to know what level Jett Lawrence would get to. And now it's almost like, yes, this is the alternate universe for Sexton, maybe becoming the guy.
Yeah, it would have looked very similar to what we saw at RedBud, I do believe. Had Jett Lawrence never been born onto this earth or found a motorcycle, I think, Chase Sexton would probably have had a much better past 18 months or so. But yes, I think that was a fair claim by Eli Tomac. He was the incumbent. He was going to be the guy to take the reins of this. And without Jett for the next 4 or 5 rounds, I personally believe we're going back to that world where Chase Sexton will be the guy to beat every single time the gate drops.
Well, we won't have to wait long to see if that holds. Certainly Hunter Lawrence would like to say a thing or two about his chances to win this title. He's certainly in it. And we'll get into the 250 class on this episode as well. But if you want to watch the racing this weekend from Minnesota, Race Day Live will kick it off, brought to you by motorsport.com at 10:30 Eastern Time. The schedule is a little different this weekend. Normally we're at 10. It'll be 10:30. And the first moto will take place at 1:30, not the normal 1 o'clock time. And that is all to fit into a live NBC window. The first moto of the day will be 450 Moto 1. That's at 1:30. That's on NBC. Of course, you can watch everything 450s and 250s on SMX Video Pass outside the United States or on Peacock. Pivotal race coming up in Minnesota. All right, let's welcome Dr. Joe McGinley in our SMX medical update. Obviously, we want to get an update on thumb injuries due to what has happened to Jett Lawrence. So the Honda put out a pretty detailed press release. So you've got some information. What are you thinking on prognosis for Jett?
Yeah, we talked about this on the Race Day Live. I think we're going to start calling this motocross thumb based on your suggestion. So great detail from Honda on this injury. Unfortunate for Jett that this happened, practice crash. In medicine, this is called skier's thumb, and essentially what it is hyperextension of the thumb, and it's right at the joint of your knuckle. So right at the knuckle, it gets hyperextended back and tears the ligament that holds that thumb stable in place. So if you have an injury where that ligament tears and is unstable, it's really hard to hold it and grip on the motorcycle. So based on the report from Honda and the interview that Jett gave, he ended up requiring surgery. He actually had a small chip fracture in there as well, requiring surgery. That's going to put him out for the rest of the motocross season, but hopefully we'll see him back for the SMX.
So with an injury like this, and motocross riders, I'm sure you know, are notorious for trying to cut corners, trying to save an hour, let alone a day or a week or a month off an injury. With a tight time frame like this, him wanting to get back for Charlotte for the opener of SMX Playoffs, is there anything he can do? Therapies, things he can do behind the scenes? He works with Doc G. I'm sure he will be daily. Is there anything you can think of that could speed up that process? Or, what's the quickest turnaround you really think is reasonable here?
Yeah, absolutely. Based on the information, again, there's 6 types of injuries for the UCL. He's likely in that category 5 or 6 requiring surgery. After you have surgery, you need that area to heal up, but there's different surgical techniques. Sometimes they'll do internal bracing to provide more stability of that ligament. And then afterwards, treating it in a typical way for recovery, there are tips and tricks. There's a lot of new science out there. Some orthopedic practices will use laser therapy to enhance healing in that area. You can use wearable ultrasound devices on those ligaments, which will also help heal it. At our practice and others around the country, they do cell therapy, so PRP and stem cells is really big in the injury recovery realm and help get the rider back out there sooner than later. So based on what we're seeing, again, I think all indications are that he will be back by that Charlotte round. He's doing all the right things, seeing the best surgeons in the country, and yeah, look forward to seeing him back on the bike.
All right, and we'll look forward to seeing you next week.
Thanks, guys.
Okay, let's remind you again, the schedule this weekend at Spring Creek, one of the favored tracks of all the riders. Everything will be a half hour different than you're used to. So Race Day Live qualifying coverage comes your way at 10:30 Eastern time Saturday morning, and the motos start at 1:30 Eastern. And 450s race first. If you want to get a 450 moto in on our NBC Live window, of course, you can also watch everything on the SMX Video Pass or Peacock inside the United States. All the motos, that includes our halftime show, our post-race show, which has been really fun as of late because the podiums have been great. And speaking of that, let's go to 32nd board, JT. We have to reflect on this RedBud podium. They played a soundbite of mine at the beginning of every show, a scene that can rival anything in motorsports. I believe it. There might not be the same number of fans that you'd have at the Indy 500 or an F1 race, but I don't know if they can match that.
I don't know how you could match this ever. The chaos and the pandemonium that podium scene is, I've never seen anything like it. I've certainly never been a part of anything like it. These people are rabid down there in all the best ways, you know, and they are so enthusiastic about being there and cheering for these riders. And imagine you're one of these riders that gets to go up there and they're all chanting your name. You get the USA chants for the 4th of July celebration. They're chanting for AP. It is just a scene to behold. And as good of a job as our team and production team does bringing this into your living room, I don't think you really can. It is just something that is, it's a once-in-a-year opportunity. It really is.
Yeah, the other forms of racing just don't let the fans get that close, and that's why motocross is so cool, and we get some of those elements of the SMX races also. And RedBud becomes the coronation for Chance Hymas. You told this story on the podium 2 years ago, the Scouting Moto Combine, one of his worst races ever. I think he finished 11-4. Haiden Deegan dominated. He wasn't even close. And 2 years later, here he is getting his first national win.
Yeah, this has really kind of come out of nowhere. You see Jett Lawrence working in the background there like a watching mother just kind of protecting her hen. But this kid, he's found it. You know, whatever it was missing, he has found it. And they talked about changing the diet. They talked about working on his technique. I know Michael Byrne has been instrumental behind the scenes in getting this program going. But being completely honest, a few months ago, there were questions about where this program was going to go. Honda HRC had to make a decision with Chance Hymas. We're going to keep him. Was the investment that they had made in him, was it working? Was there a future for this program? Well, thankfully for everybody involved on that side, that's a resounding yes at this point. He's second place in championship points. He gets his first overall win at RedBud, just like Haiden Deegan maybe did a year ago. So yeah, it's a fantastic success story, and I think everybody there is breathing a big sigh of relief that the train is on the tracks here.
So Hymas becomes the second non-Haiden Deegan winner of a 250 overall this year. The other one, Ty Masterpool, just a classic battle right to the wire with Deegan in the first moto. Those fans on the fence line, those sand rollers, unreal. I mean, the RedBud crowd is always awesome, as we mentioned, but to see a side-by-side battle with one of the biggest stars in the sport and one of the great stories of the sport, Masterpool versus Deegan, that was so cool. But as for Deegan, okay, he doesn't get the first moto win by 0.3 of a second. That's not a disaster. Second moto, not as good. Turns out he crashed into that bike that we saw crash right before Vial and Masterpool came through. So you could write off the second moto result with that. But JT, you think just watching Deegan that also it wasn't quite as good as the previous rounds?
Yeah, he just looked a little off to me. Just noticed a few things in corners, and that could be bike setup. That could be just him having an off day, but he didn't look especially in that second moto, he just didn't have the pace that he normally has. He wasn't able to just blitz by riders the way he normally does. And that's okay, because to me, the most important aspect of that is throughout this season, regardless of what adversity has been thrown at him, bad starts, big crashes like Hangtown, and again here at RedBud, you know what he's doing? He's maintaining and only increasing his points lead throughout that process. So if you can do that, if you can have your bad days turn into an even Steven type point situation, you put so much pressure on everybody else, and eventually you start pulling away in the championship exactly the way he has.
What's pretty cool is we keep referencing that Scouting Moto Combine for both Degan and Hymas and how important that has become now to their development. And then we get to see it again at RedBud. Now, the headliner is Drew Adams, who was also very fast and won a lot of SX Futures races, won it. But that's only if you look at the results. Shout out to Landon Gordon, who's earlier in his development, only on a 250F for the first time this year. He led the entire thing, like down to the last turn before he tipped over. And then I talked to Ryan Holiday, who manages Kawasaki Team Green. He said, yeah, he was tired. These are long motos. That's the point of this whole thing, to expose them to that.
Yeah, this is such a cool development. We've watched this program grow. And if you were wondering, hey, is this working? Are we seeing development come out of this? Well, I would tell you this. In 2022, Chance Hymas graduated from this program, and you could say with mixed results. It didn't always go very well, especially in the motocross portion. Supercross went a little bit better. Last year, Haiden Deegan graduates from this program. Well, guess who was first and second place in championship points in the Pro Motocross Championship? So I think that's proof enough that these guys are figuring things out. And when they take that step, they are much more prepared than they ever would have been in the past.
Just a matter of time here for Drew Adams. He's going to be a player. He's checking all the boxes. Now even racing in Canada to gain more experience with some pros up there. It's great, as we mentioned, in Supercross. Okay, let's switch to the 450 division now. Yeah, so Jett Lawrence, he's out as far as racing is concerned, but he still came to RedBud, and this is not normal. Most riders of his stature, we haven't seen Eli Tomac and Cooper Webb at races signing autographs. This is cool that he did this.
Yeah, and I think it's multi-layered here. For one, I think he just wants to come and enjoy the weekend and have a good time, because he doesn't really get to do that. There's so much pressure on Jett Lawrence all the time to win races and win championships. And also, don't forget, his older brothers fighting for the 450 Pro Motocross Championship, and one of his best friends, Chance Hymas, is second place in points in the 250 Pro Motocross Championship. And also their training partner, Drew Adams, is racing on Friday that we just talked about. So there are so many reasons for him to be there. So it makes sense on paper, but I think he enjoyed this weekend at RedBud. And even with a cast on his hand, fresh out of surgery, I think he truly enjoyed the RedBud experience more than most weekends he will ever get a chance to, just because of that huge burden taken off his back of having to perform. He could just be there, be a fan, and watch the races like everybody else.
Yeah, my co-host in the booth, Ricky Carmichael, even theorizing maybe this helps Jett long-term. It's going to be bad to be out 6 to 8 weeks. He will be back for SMX Playoffs, but just finally getting a little pressure relief, because it has been a whirlwind over the last 14 months. Maybe that helps him down the road. Now, yes, it didn't work out the way Jett would have liked it for Hunter Lawrence, who ends up going 2-4 in the motos. So as we said at the top of the show, you leave RedBud saying, this is Chase Sexton's. He dominated. He went 1-1. But there is a world where Hunter Lawrence wins Moto 1 and everything looks different.
Yeah, I think Hunter was on his way. I do believe he was going to win that first moto until that gigantic crash. Now, nothing was guaranteed. You could see Sexton right in the background there. He's maybe a second behind, maybe less than that. But Hunter I think he had done the hard work. He had proven that he could, when Chase was bringing his best laps with 10 minutes to go, Hunter actually picked his pace back up and was able to match that. So I think it was a big step. Now, he's got to finish the process, and he's also got to bring that same level in Moto 2, which he was not able to do this weekend. But I was very impressed. I really thought that Chase would kind of have his way in the second half of that moto, and Hunter pushed back pretty hard on that until he didn't.
For now, we're sitting on an historic win, really, for Chase Sexton. This is the closest track that he'll race on all year to where he's from in Illinois, not too far across the state line. Heck, even the water truck driver at RedBud is actually from his home track and Sunset Ridge, and they sprayed him as he came across the line. They had prearranged, if you go 1-1, I'll spray you with water. And those vibes, man, he's got a lot of momentum coming in now to Minnesota.
Yeah, he was locked in this weekend. I even asked him, hey, you want to do an interview before this second moto? And he was very polite and very professional, but you could just tell he did not want to do that. He was in full race mode. He knew what was on the line here, not only for the championship and the momentum, but also, like you said, home race. He had never won an overall here before. It was very apparent to me what this moment meant leading into that second moto. And he got the job done. You know, it reminded me a lot of the performance he put in here in the 2022 Motocross of Nations, getting the job done, and the joy on his face after that was apparent for everybody to see. Now we're going to also see what that does leading into Spring Creek, because I believe that was a huge confidence booster for him. And I think he is finding himself again, right? We always ask that question, what's eating Chase Sexton over the past year or so? I think he's kind of come out of a shell, and I think we're going to see the Chase Sexton that we thought we would see over the past year.
Now time for SMX Facts. We bring in our statistician, Clinton Fowler. We've seen some spectacularly close racing this year, almost an instant replay. Ty Masterpool versus Haiden Deegan at RedBud, kind of like we saw at High Point. You and I have talked about this quite a bit off the shows. I feel like the racing's closer than I ever remember seeing it. I know people want to talk about glory days. I don't remember races being this close this often. What does the data show?
Weege, incredible racing lately. That first moto at RedBud was the second closest victory in the last decade. To put that in perspective, that's 254 motos in the 250 class, and that was the second closest. So just absolutely impressive performance by Ty Masterpool and Haiden Deegan. The interesting part is two in the second and third closest victories come from this season. And JT, both of those was Ty Masterpool getting the better of Haiden Deegan. What does it take for guys to go battle to toe-to-toe after a 35-minute moto?
Well, I think for Ty, he had more confidence. He got the job done at High Point, holding Haiden off there. So I think he had a little bit more just kind of a positive feel that I can do this. And I think secondarily to that, this is a track that he rides really, really well. He had that podium in a moto in 2020. He showed us that he has a ton of speed here. So he had more confidence coming into RedBud than most tracks anyway. And I think he just followed through on that. And we're really the benefactors. We're getting to watch these fantastic motos that are getting decided on the last lap.
Well, now you got me curious. If that was the second closest, what was the closest in the last 10 years?
Well, closest in the last 10 years was back in 2014, and that's where Blake Baggett beat Cooper Webb. Absolutely amazing. It was less than a tenth of a second. I mean, absolute photo finish in the literal sense. So incredible battle then, and not that long ago, really, in the grand scheme of it, Weege.
Yeah, and then also we've been talking about how Jett Lawrence manages these leads and doesn't win by a large margin. And you have some data there to kind of show, yeah, he's in a good amount of close races and often with a familiar foe.
I don't know if I was Hunter, if I would love this stat, but Jett Lawrence in 2022, when they were racing against each other on the 250s, got the better of them in 3 of the top 10 closest victories in the last decade. And hey, it just continues, guys. The closest 450 race this year, the Moto 1 at High Point, was also Jett Lawrence beating Hunter Lawrence. So we're getting to see those guys play out in battles over and over.
Yeah, that means High Point had double in the 450 and 250 class. I'm telling you, this season's close. Now, speaking of close, we're going to transition to SMX points and just update us on this bubble battle to be in the top 20 and not have to go to the last chance qualifiers.
Yeah, absolutely, Weege. I think we're going to have some incredible battles for the 20th spot, for the last few spots in each of the classes. For the 450s, the key piece is this. The top 20 cutoff is 153 points. Now, we've got 13 riders of the top 20 that are already scored 153 points and likely have secured a position in the playoffs. There's another 4 riders, Christian Craig, Freddie Noren, Grant Harlan, and Phil Nicoletti, that I think are going to secure that position before the end of the season, likely by Budds Creek. That leaves 3 positions left to battle. And guys, there's 7 or 8 riders I think could do it. I've currently got Garrett Marchbanks slotting it at 18th, Dean Wilson at 19th, and Justin Hill at 20th. Now, This assumes that Dean Wilson talked to him yesterday. It assumes his scan on his wrist goes well. He's gonna come back for Washougal if that's the case, and we'll likely see him at one of 2 or 3 of the last 3 rounds. So that's the key. Justin Hill has said he'll be back for 4 rounds. He's got to come back and do it. But JT, there's a bunch of other guys. Harry Coulis is now in for the next 2 rounds. He's been phenomenal with 2 9th overalls. You got Colt Nichols coming back for the HEP Motorsports team. There's Kyle Chisholm, there's Cullen Park, there's Derek Kepp. All these guys are still in. Who do you think down the stretch has the ability to lock in one of those last 3 spots?
Well, just think about who are the best motocross riders of the group, because that's where the points will be earned. And it's so interesting to think about how this pendulum swings, because a lot of these riders that you're talking about were 250 regional supercross riders that made the jump to the 450 for pro motocross. And now they're playing that catch-up game, and they're really racing against time. You know, that clock is ticking, and every single moto that they don't perform up to their best is a lost opportunity. So it's going to be something we watch all the way down the stretch, and every single moto is going to count, because when you have a finite amount of opportunity, if you miss one of those, it can be huge in the story of who gets in and who ends up in that LCQ come Charlotte.
All right, thanks, Clinton. We'll take all the data and jumble it up again this weekend. Well, the other question we've been asking with Sexton over the past year is, will he return to Team USA for Motocross of Nations? Because he not racing it last year because he was switching to KTM and the sponsorships and all these things that had to work their way through. I think that prevented other riders from racing on the team as well. They all want Sexton on the team if you're one of the American racers. So he and Plessinger were actually asked about this in the press conference at RedBud. They said they have not been approached by anyone yet, but Chase made it pretty clear, and Aaron, that they would love to race for the team. I think the reason it's been delayed, Mike Pelletier of the AMA was actually at the MXGP race in Indonesia, so he wasn't at RedBud. So I think this will unfold in the next couple of weeks. The main thing people want to know is Haiden Deegan going to race for the team. I think Mike is indicating that Yamaha is interested, so that's good. But what we do know for now is we have an auction going. Our friend Paul Parabinos from Renthal put together Raise It for USA. Go to that website. And then Mike Bonacci of Club MX spent the whole weekend collecting all this red, white, and blue RedBud stuff. You can bid on it, and all the money goes to the Team USA effort.
Yeah, this is really cool. And I've been going to this race all over the world for a very long time. And to your point about those riders choosing to go, I truly hope we can put our best foot forward. It's been a hit and miss proposition over the last few years about who's going to go. Well, if they're not going, I'm not going, right? Hopefully we can get our best team out there. And it's hard for me to believe that with Roger DeCoster playing such a big role that he wouldn't be absolutely supporting Chase Sexton, and if AP gets picked, to bring those guys. And that's the question to me. I think Sexton is a shoo-in. I think, does Haiden Deegan go? That is the second question. If he says yes, he's in. The other big question is, who is that third rider? Do they go back to Justin Cooper, who was the hero of 2022? Do they take AP, who said yes last year when not many people did? That's a really interesting proposition for the second 450 rider.
Yeah, and the final point on RedBud was, RedBud's always big. Everyone's felt like it was bigger than at least any national there. I don't know if it was bigger than when it hosted Motocross of Nations, but for the first time ever, they did sell out the campground. That's the feel of motocross right there. And that's why we have that at the SMX playoff rounds. You can't pull your motorhome up next to a supercross track. You can do it at all 3 SMX rounds. And that is the experience of a lifetime you're seeing right there.
Yeah, I know Ricky Carmichael is on record saying that he will be in the Charlotte SMX campground hanging out. So if you're there, hold him to it, because listen, you want some bench racing, you want some behind the scenes stories. Ricky Carmichael has those in spades. So it's going to be a fantastic weekend. If you have the ability to be there all weekend in your motorhome, good on you.
Okay, our big interview this week, we've got the Senior Director of Operations for SMX. That's our friend Mike Muye. We're going to talk the track designs for the upcoming SMX playoff rounds. We're going to start where we actually have seen this before at ZMAX Dragway in Charlotte, but that was the most mysterious race maybe we've ever seen. Last year, everyone was confused, Mike. So talk about Charlotte, putting those motocross elements in, and are there any differences for this year's event there?
Yeah, so we completely reworked the track, us in conjunction with Dirtworks, and we're racing backwards this time. Still the split start, which would be really cool. It was a fun element that we added last year in the outdoor section, but we learned a lot, in that first year, and we want to open it up and make it even more motocrossy this year. So that was really the goal on all 3 tracks is bring in more of that motocross raw speed element.
Yeah. So what was the team feedback? You go through this inaugural season, which was a success by, every metric you could use, but then you go back and talk to the teams. What did they say about the tracks, the events, or things that maybe they would want to see for 2024?
There was a lot of excitement. I don't think that any single one of the teams knew what to expect, and that made it fun, both for us, the fans, and for the teams themselves, because they're constantly adjusting and testing and working on the motorcycles even throughout the race weekend. So that's our goal going into 2024 as well, is make these unique. And don't make them cookie cutter, and really test these guys, both the riders and the teams and the mechanics.
Yeah. So, every year you're going to obviously want to make changes, improve, and make these playoff rounds as good as they can be. Can you highlight any of the big changes or kind of the new additions you have for 2024 that you're most excited about?
Yeah, I mean, we've done the split starts, so that's not new. But racing back behind the start gate is something kind of new and unique. In Texas Motor Speedway specifically, I'd kind of mentioned racing on the natural terrain, but different from Chicagoland, there will be a true mixture of natural terrain versus more supercross style obstacles placed on the asphalt. So that'll be unique. In Las Vegas, it's basically a blank canvas. That's a very unique facility. It gives us the ability to race almost in a square, as opposed to a long oval in a speedway or a narrow drag strip. So that one's probably the one I'm most excited about. Is it's not very often that we get a blank canvas to design a track on, and so there's a lot of unique obstacles there, a lot of access for the fans in Las Vegas, inside of the track, and being able to see a lot of different unique angles that they wouldn't normally be able to see at a supercross or even a motocross. So each one has its own distinct feel. Even though, both Las Vegas and Charlotte are drag strips, they're not going to look or feel the same. And that's what's cool.
One of the fun things we got to see at some of the races last year was kind of integrating that motocross style, fans on the infield, getting up close to the track, which is obviously something you can't do in a supercross stadium. And then you were saying you're going to try to take that maybe to an even higher level at this Las Vegas event.
Yeah, exactly, Weege. So we want to take it to the next level with the inside track experience. You can purchase those at smxexperiences.com. It's 2 platforms, literally 15 feet behind the starting gate. You get close access to the athletes as they're loading the gate, when they take off on the gate, and exclusive access to different portions of the racetrack. So it'll really be a neat experience for everybody.
All right, Mike, get back to work. We'll see these tracks in the flesh in September.
Sounds good, guys. Thanks for having me.
Okay, we are off to Millville and Spring Creek, one of the favorite tracks in the championship. JT, tell everybody why the riders like this place, unless you didn't. I don't know. I'm just assuming you liked it.
No, I did. And it's all about the dirt, really. You have this great combination of sand and clay that offers a lot of traction. And if you ask the riders, what do they like? What makes a great racetrack? What makes great dirt? It is that traction. Can you be aggressive? Can you trust the dirt? What your eyes are telling you, is that how the motorcycle is going to respond? And Spring Creek does that better than most racetracks. So it allows riders to really kind of unleash all the techniques they want. They can really push, versus a racetrack that we're going to head to after that Washougal, where you have to be extremely careful. Spring Creek is not a racetrack like that. It is one where you can be aggressive. You can really, really push the envelope. And in the end, it's just a fun racetrack to be on.
Cool. Well, if you folks want to watch it, again, it's 10:30 will be motorsport.com's coverage, Race Day Live. That's qualifying our 1-hour show. And the motos start at 1:30. These are all Eastern time. And the first moto of the day will be 450s. 450s are going to race first. 250s will race second. That first 450 moto is live on NBC. So tell your friends and family to tune in if they do not watch us every week. But if you do, of course, we'll be there on Peacock and or the SMX Video Pass all weekend long. Again, starting at 1:30 Eastern Time. We'll see you at Spring Creek. Another major turning point in the championship could be in the offing this Saturday.